Hey everyone, I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting. Our vision is for every child on the planet to have a church. We do this by helping you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches that intentionally and strategically reach the next generation. Well, on this episode, I have my colleague, Andrea Wells. Andrea has done so many different things for Stadia over the past years. Andrea helps lead global initiatives. She helps lead domestic initiatives. She does a lot of church relationships for us. But what she does incredibly well, amidst of other things, is care for others. Andrea has helped Stadia develop what I believe is one of the best care systems that I have ever seen. How do you care for other team members? How do you systematically care for investors? How do you systematically care for partners? This is one you definitely want to listen to if you're involved in an organization where you need and want to care well for others. Welcome to the Church Planting Podcast. Well, I'm really excited about this episode of the Church Planting Podcast because I have one of my favorite people in the world on this episode, Andrea Wells. She's a friend of my wife and mine. Actually, her and her husband are, but she's also a work colleague. She works at Stadia with us. We serve together, and we're talking about a topic that we both love, but really that she's helped guide me in also. Andrea, welcome to the Church Planting Podcast.
Thanks, Greg. I'm excited about this conversation.
And gosh, you just came off a big trek. You and some women were out trekking in the wilderness. What was up with that?
I love your description of it. That one's fun. Yeah, it was 6 women. Me and 5 other women. We went up to Olympic National Park in Washington State, and we had been meeting for 6 months prior to that to grow together, do some development pieces together. But in the midst of all that, we've been raising money to help start new churches that care for the next generation. And so we went up last week, and the final of everything was we walked 75,000 steps. We did 28 miles in 3 days, and we raised $70,925. So
Way to go. Way to
fun.
and the trip in the process. I love all that. That has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today. I love the spirit of adventure and your discipleship heart. We're going to be talking about how do we care well for those we serve, and how do we care well for those we serve with, right alongside. I just want to start off with, just kind of this philosophy of caring. Why is caring for people we serve or those we care with even an important topic?
Well, I think the simplest of it is to just go back and see who Jesus prioritized and how he prioritized them, and they were people, and he cared for them well. In every situation that we see Jesus interacting with human beings, he is doing it in a loving way. Even if it is a hard truth, he's doing it in a loving way, and he is doing it in a non-distracted way and intentionally caring for the specific person in front of them.
Okay, so let's talk about the idea of caring. So does that mean I'm sitting down and I'm listening? Am I giving gifts? What's the scope of caring?
Mm-hmm. I think the scope of caring is actually pretty large. I think it can kind of run the gamut of a lot of different ways to care for people. And part of that is because we are complex people and God had made us all very specifically. So my personality goes into how I need to be cared for, like how God wired me, what my giftings are, season of life. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces of how to care for somebody depending on who they are, what they need, and even the season of life that they're in.
Okay, so we serve a lot of people, but gosh, there's a lot of people that are serving in the Stadia organization and church planters and so forth. So when we talk about kind of how do we care well for those, let's say outside our organization to start with. So people that we're serving or that are serving with us or church planters and so forth in the local church, it could be for your volunteers. It could be, for businesses that are helping you out, whatever. Give some ideas. How did you come up with this idea of I think it's actually a care plan?
Mhm. Yeah, so here's what happened was I was working at a church plant for 9 years. I was on the well, you're in a church planting, so you do a million different things, but my main focus was kids ministry. And as
Okay.
ministry grew, um, soon we were into like over 200 volunteers. And I couldn't care for that many people by myself. But I wanted everybody to be cared for super well because, again, I believe that God wants us to care for people well, but also they're pouring their lives out and volunteering for a church. And so the idea of like, how can I care well for this many people? I needed to create a plan to be able to do that. Um, so I actually, from the pastor at the time, very different personality than me, but he was really great at systems and I was not when I was young, but I learned the value of great systems and how they can help you from him. And so from that learning and knowing that I needed to care for all of these people, I sat down and just created a basically care system for caring for 224 people. And so,
Okay, that sounds monumental. So break that down for us a little bit. Like, what does that mean in real terms?
yep. Well, first of all, I wanted to come from like mindset wise, I wanted to come from a place of abundance of care, not a scarcity mindset of care. So not a like, well, I said thank you when I walked out the door. That's good enough. Like I didn't want that to ever be where my mindset was. It was like, how can I be the most caring possible? So in figuring out like what could that look like? So I have this volunteer, what's the best way I could care for them in a 12-month period over the year? So that could be life events. So it's like, how do I get their birthday and do something about their birthday or their work anniversary if they work for you, or um, just paying attention to when possible their kid graduated college or the different life events that happen for us. Christmas, Easter, those ones are easy, but they're there, and that's an easy way to care. I thought if something hard happens for somebody, like a bereavement type of thing, how can I care for them? They're super sick, so I do something. Their mom dies, so we can do something. Like where can I meet them in the celebratory places of their life? Where can I meet them in the hard places of their life? And then the last third thing I would say is the just because. So if you get flowers just because on a Tuesday afternoon, you're smiling and you feel loved.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Great.
That's yeah. Okay, so but let's come back. I'm gonna keep digging deeper here because we make this real practical. 200 people. How are
Yep.
you keeping track of all of that data, right? Like, okay, I sent so and so flowers just because, or oh gosh, for that graduation. I mean, are you using a computer program, or what are you using to manage all this?
Yeah, so for like with that our kids ministry team, we did this with Stadia staff. We do this on onboarding. Every time that I would onboard somebody, and from the start, I had to just like send this out to everyone, collect the information. But then every time we would have a new volunteer or a new staff member in the onboarding, I'm collecting information about them. So what I would call that is like a favorite things or all about you form, which is essentially like go to Google, do a Google form, ask for their birthday, ask for their work anniversary, or well, that one, but their wedding anniversary, their favorite color, their favorite candy bar, like what's their favorite thing under $10, what's their favorite thing under $5. If you ask all of these questions in one form, and then you've got all this data right up front to then take and to build into a basically task management program or to a calendar, like whatever works for your brain. So for me, what worked for my brain is, or well, it does now is like Asana, which is a project management tool. A million of those out there. But I knew that like there's no way I'm gonna remember 224 birthdays. And so I went, whenever we have a new volunteer come on, I take their information and I'm literally creating tasks in Asana for myself, except for I'm saying every July 7th, which is my birthday, but every July 7th for the end of time, I want this task management program a week beforehand to say, "Hey, go buy a gift for, so and so." And then I just go to the link of favorite things or all about you of all of my team. and I can immediately see some of the things that they love to do. So if I see like hobbies on there, they love to drink wine or they like to garden, it already gives me a place to buy something specific for that person so that it's not a random like Dunkin' Donuts gift card, but it's like, here's a really cool set tool that, is something that you actually like to do. So then you can be specific to what they like as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you sent me one time, I love to cook, and you sent me a chef knife with my last name engraved on it, and I think you said, "Go stab yourself," or something, but, no, it was but I thought, what a meaningful gift, and thoughtful gift, so I really appreciated the thoughtfulness of it, and like you said, that it wasn't just a gift card. Now, it's funny that we're talking about this because I was just involved we just signed a new contract with a new employee yesterday, and I actually was copied on her docs. And one of the things right in the opening paragraphs was, please go to this link and fill out this personal likes form. And like it had, your favorite fast food restaurant or your favorite local restaurant. And all kinds of different questions on it. So, I mean, I literally just saw that being used by our team yesterday to collect all that data for a new person. Okay, so let's talk about a budget because like this sounds expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can be. Like, it depends on it depends what your overall budget is, period. But I think, like, what I did with, like, that kids ministry budget was that I knew what my budget was for the year and what I needed to, like, survive, and then what I had to actually to be able to pour into a volunteer. And so that it might mean that, once you break it down, you might only have $10 a person, like,
Right.
for their birthday, but that's okay. That's where you can start, and there's still specific meaningful things that you can do for $10. And I mean, there's lots of different places even online to just give you ideas of all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think some of that stuff has to do with how specific and thoughtful it is versus how much it costs. And it's really just sitting down and seeing what fits into your budget and what you really can budget per person for care. And so for Stadia, for example, we figured that out for what that looks like for us right now. And then that's communicated with all of the team leaders, who is responsible for caring for people on their team, so that across the board, everybody knows freely, this is what I have to spend on a birthday. Like, they don't have to go think about it. They don't have to try and pull it from somewhere else. It's like, no, we have budgeted this. And I think that, I mean, many, many, many studies show that if your employees feel cared for, you will get more fruit out of them.
Oh, there's no doubt about the payoff, and this is gonna come out after, Janie Mahaffey's birthday, so we can talk about this now because Janie's birthday is coming up. Actually, it just happened, but, so Janie, I'm her team leader, and so I get a notification that says, "Hey, Janie's birthday is coming up in a week or 2 weeks," whenever the notification, and is there, anything special you'd like to get for Janie? Well, I knew Janie's actually going on a mountain trek with me in Peru in August, and so I was able to go, okay, and this is going to sound kind of goofy, but I got Janie these little Purell things that are attached to carabiners that will attach to her backpack, sunscreen carabiner as well, and I think Deep Woods Off carabiner, right? So it wasn't like there's tons of money that was spent there, but they were actually very thoughtful, very meaningful gifts that we were able to send to Janie so she knows, oh, Greg actually thought about this. Well, it was easy because it was, I think about it? Yes. So, some thought goes into it, but certainly it's easier when you have something triggering that. And then there are notes in the docs that say, hey, this is what's going on, or this is what they like, and so forth. Okay. So that's the kind of gifts. Talk about caring in maybe the non-gift ways. Or what else are you in the care plan? Would you say are ways we care for each other, those we serve alongside
Yep.
that aren't necessarily giving them something?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think you can easily just go back to like the 5 love languages. So gifts, we talked about gifts. touch is probably not one you're gonna do.
We don't want to go there too much. Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah.
one. But then quality time and words of affirmation and acts of service are also three great ways to be able to do that. So if you are, you take your employee out for a lunch or you just invite them in to like talk and ask about how their family is, that's quality time. And you can double that one with the words of affirmation that by the time they walked out of your office, you've also intentionally had three words of encouragement that you wanted to tell them specifically to encourage them. And words of affirmation can go through lots of different ways, in person, but also in handwritten card. We all know that we don't get a lot of handwritten mail or any like really mail that we like getting these days. Most of the time you open your mailbox and it's like, I don't want to open that one. I don't want to open that one.
Yeah.
But if you get an envelope in the mail that is a handwritten card just saying, "Hey, I wanted to know I really appreciate what you said to me the other day," or how you, stood up for what you believed in the other day, or really I saw you care well for somebody, or I just appreciate you. Um, those again, it's one of those things where if you get a card in the mail that is just words of
Yeah.
affirmation.
No, it's so unique these days. I think it's a lost art. And so it's one of the things we encourage all of our team members to do is to have, just some basic thank you cards
Yeah.
on hand where you just it takes you 5 minutes,
Mhm.
if that, right? To fill out a card just to say, "Hey, I so appreciated you being on the podcast, Andrea, and so appreciate you, leading those women on that crazy trek you did." And then you get that in the mail, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I hardly ever get anything like this,"
Yeah. And you
and
feel paid attention to. You feel
it'll
like,
probably sit on your counter for a week.
yeah, yep, exactly. And that stuff is so like, I would encourage, I mean, anybody. My mom taught me this actually. She always had a lot of cards on hand. And so I now also I literally have a drawer that is birthday cards, bereavement cards, anniversary cards, congratulations cards, thank you cards, and you can just I mean, they have like packs of that stuff on Amazon. So you can just buy all that and have it on hand so that even there's lots of times where I'm like scrolling through Instagram or something on Facebook pops up and I see that like one of the pastors that we're working with, like their daughter just graduated high school. So how easy is it for me to walk over, get a congratulations card, write a note to say congratulations on graduating high school and put it in the mail, especially when I already have all that there. Meanwhile, that makes their whole family feel seen and cared for.
It's the other thing, Andrea, so we use strengths finders a lot at Stadia and in our discovery process with church planners and so forth. And one of the things, so my wife and I have been through that extensively and with the coach because it's been so helpful to us. And, my top five are actually they're sitting right here on my desk: futuristic and ideation and strategic and all these things. Okay. My wife's number one strength is empathy. Okay. So that empathy is in my bottom five, right? It's like non-existent in me. Now, my whole life, not my whole life, my last 30 years of marriage, Julie would come to me and say, "Hey, gosh, Greg, can you give me some leadership advice on this?" And she's a tremendous leader, but it was normative for someone who has, ideation and strategic thinking as their strengths for someone to come and ask for that advice. But if I were to go to her and for empathy advice, it was almost embarrassing. She's like going, "For God's sake, you're a pastor. You should already know about this stuff, right?" But once we discovered that, Julie now will speak into my life frequently and say, "Hey, you should be going to that funeral, or you should be sending this. You should actually call this person because they're going through a tough time." And like it's embarrassing almost for me to say that I need someone to help me with that, but it's been so helpful. Now, here's why I'm even bringing that up is because if you put a system in place and processes in place, and have someone that like has empathy and compassion and mercy gifts to help design that, it is going to help you as a leader immensely because a lot of leaders aren't wired to think that way, right? So who would you go like when you're designing that kind of system, Andrew? Who do you bring into the help loop for that?
Um, see. I mean, whenever I went, it's for specifically for Stadia, I went back to I just thought through, like, literally, I like pulled up our staff page
Yeah.
and I'm thinking through, like, what is my experience with, like, basically, the people who stuck out to me to ask if they were interested in being part of this are the people that I see doing this naturally on a consistent basis. And
Oh.
and so, I also probably could have looked at their strength finders. I didn't do that, actually. That would have been a really good idea. But I was just looking at, like, who do I see doing this already? And that's who I asked. And all those people were super interested in joining the team that we put together to put the care plan together. And it was great because there were people from different ages, different walks of life, but all really knew the value of care. And so a lot of different ideas were brought into the mix whenever we did that. Because even though I was leading the team, and I think about this stuff all the time. I'm still not thinking of everything, like having everybody's different brains in a room to give ideas who have also experienced different kinds of care themselves that touch
Yeah.
them, that they want that to happen for other people as well. And so bringing in, like, all those different experiences, walks of life, and how they care for people, it just brought a lot to the table to cover even more basis of care than I could have done it by myself.
So let's talk about bereavement because I think this is one of the areas of care we need to do better in. I think it was Rudolph Giuliani's biography. I read this the first time. He had a chapter titled "Weddings Sometimes, Funerals Always."
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, first I'll talk from my own personal experience is, 5.5 years ago, my mom passed away. But she passed away from pancreatic cancer, so there were 2 years leading up to that were, I mean, they sucked.
Yeah.
And, a couple of things. So I know you're saying we can grow in this, but I wanna celebrate Stadia and how you all showed up for me because I had also just been hired. Like, I was a newbie to the team as well. And in the time of my mom, like, slowly dying before she actually passed, one of the best gifts that Stadia gave me was, freedom and time. So, if my, mom had an extra appointment and I wanted to be there with her because she was sitting there getting chemo for 8 hours, like, I I would like to not take vacation time for all of that stuff because 'cause I'm gonna need vacation after she passes, and then I'm, in a dealing with grief. And you all at Stadia was so, you all let me feel free to do what I needed to do in that season to be with my mom, which was a really, really hard season. I never felt like anybody was saying to me, "Hey, you can go to that, but you better have this done, and if that's not done by," it's like you're going
Yes.
out on the stage, but there's the person behind the curtain that's got the hook waiting, and they're gonna rip you off. It's like, the true freedom to, like, actually be with my family in that moment, like, that time was so I talk to people about all the time, and because that's how I encourage other people to care for their employees or volunteers or whatever, is give them freedom in bereavement. Um and then when my mom did pass, several of our team showed up at her funeral and drove to it, and it was at least an hour and a half for multiple people, probably some of them flew. And I got lots of cards in the mail and, with no one, it skirted the issue. Like a lot of times in bereavement, you don't know what to say. And sometimes when you say a lot in those moments, you say something stupid. But like, just showing up, you don't have to say a lot of words, you just show up. Show up, or you just say, "I'm sorry this sucks. I'm sorry this sucks. I'm sorry this sucks," because there isn't anything else you can do. But the acknowledging that time, anytime you're in a kinda situation like that, it sucks, and you just want to hear, the empathy of somebody's like, "Yeah, you're right, and I'm really sorry that you're going through this." So, I mean, showing up in multiple different ways in that, I think, really sticks out to people. And then, like, obviously, that's what I'm talking the most about. So Stadia's done lots of really celebratory things for me as well, which I also care about. But the thing that, like, has stuck deep in me was how you all cared for me in a really, really challenging part of my life.
Yeah, my mom died just a little over a year ago, and might sound a little goofy, but my mom's favorite flowers were daffodils, and so Janie Mahaffey again drove over from Pennsylvania several hours to be at my mom's funeral. Which again, there you talk about care plan, and she saw that we had in the the funeral, the whatever it's called afterwards, where you have food stuff, and we had daffodils on every table, right? And so then the team gave me a stained glass, just small thing, maybe 10 inches tall, stained glass daffodil that sits in our home on the windowsill.
Mm.
I don't think it probably cost a whole lot of money or anything, but I love it because every time I see it, I think of my mom and I think of the team caring for me and understanding that meaningfulness. And so, coming back to the idea of weddings sometimes but funerals always, the principle behind that is celebrations are really, really important. But man, when people are going through a hard time, if they are cared for well, if we are cared for well, we will remember that our entire lives. And so that's so important as we care for each other, care for those we serve alongside.
Yeah.
Okay, and Andrea, this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you for bringing this to Stadia, and I'm praying all of our leaders out there will take this to heart. Hey, just another question before you kind of as we wrap up here. Anything that you're reading right now?
Um, I am reading a book called Living Fearlessly.
There's a surprise. There's a surprise.
It was a recommendation from a friend, and I just finished Business Made Simple, which is excellent. I love his writing, but I just started Living Fearlessly. And as you're talking, actually, because you asked about books, I'm gonna throw 2 books out here that has to do with this topic because I just
Sure, excellent. Yeah.
so one of them is called Giftology,
Oh, yes.
and
I
and
read that. That is phenomenal. You told me, Greg, you got to read this.
yeah, it's excellent, and it will give you a lot of. It's like a read it over and over every year, but it gives you a lot of ideas for this kind of stuff. The other one that I love is The Power of Moment.
Yeah, I read that too because you recommended it.
It's so good. But it helps you like think creatively and how to, take the moments in our lives and what to celebratory, bereavement, whatever, and how to care for them well. But anyway, those are ones that I've been thinking about rereading because this topic was brought up again in the podcast. But Living Fearlessly is what I just started, so I'll let you know how it goes.
Friends, you can see why I was so excited to have Andrea on this podcast. Andrea, thank you so much for being on the Church Planting Podcast.
Yeah, of course. This has been a blast. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast, part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.